Today we're primarily going to be getting into base and face products. So we're going to talk about foundation. We're going to wade into the controversial landmine that is contour and contour product coloring. We're going to do a little bit of cheek product, not too much with eyeshadow today, but at the end of the video, I will show you guys some palettes side by side so you can compare sort of warm, neutral, cool. Hey you guys, so I am a certified color analyst, and one of the things that my clients struggle with the most once I have assigned them their palette is makeup, and how do they adjust their makeup from what they've been doing to what is going to be cohesive with their palette and make them look their best. So as a true spring myself, I thought I would do my makeup with you guys today, walking you through some products that are going to look fabulous on true springs with some side-by-side comparisons against colors that won't look as good, and some tips and tricks that should help you guys out when you're shopping for products. I also do have a link to my Shop My Below where I have a color analysis tab with makeup recommendations specific to each palette if you want to go and check that out. Little emotional support beverage first. So I'm going to go in with my sunscreen first, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to start talking about foundations. So when people get their palette and they find out if they have a warm or cool or neutral undertone, foundation is the first thing that they want to know about. Does that mean that if I'm a spring or an autumn, my foundation should be warm, and obviously vice versa? My answer to this is always not necessarily. Foundations should just match your skin. You can use the cool, warm, neutral monikers as a guide, but a lot of foundations are mislabeled anyway. And for the most part, in my experience, cool foundations kind of exclusively mean they're going to be very pink. Warm foundations mean they're just going to be very yellow. And neutral foundations, depending on the brand, will often be somewhere in the middle. There are some brands that have gotten a lot better about spreading out undertone. House Labs is one that comes to mind, where they will do things like rosy undertone or a peachy beige undertone, which sort of starts getting into some of the other possibilities. So I always just advise, find the foundation that matches your skin. And a big part of the reason for that comes down to application technique. So the most look like yourself makeup technique for foundation, just for everyday wear, is not actually to have it in a full layer across your whole face. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna find a foundation where when you put it along your jawline here, you can't see it. So this is Dior's Forever Skin Glow in shade 1N. Even as a true spring, I wear a more neutral foundation. And using one of these flat foundation brushes, you're just gonna dab a little bit, blend, and see if you can still see it, aside from there being a little bit of coverage. And when you have a foundation that matches your skin tone, what you wanna do then is just go in and kind of give yourself like a retouch, essentially. The same thing that a TikTok filter would do. Just find where you have redness, where you have maybe some blueness, where you have veins or scarring, and just give it a little once over. And if you have a foundation that properly matches your skin, you can do this without it looking splotchy or unblended or like you've done something weird with your makeup. If your makeup doesn't match your skin tone, that's where you get into needing to do a full application, potentially down onto your neck, where it's not even close to what your natural skin is, and you have to put on layers and layers of makeup, which I am 39, and for my other elder millennials, you might be starting to notice that the more makeup you put on, the older you look. Contour is one of the few makeup products that you will hear me saying your color analysis doesn't hugely matter. And the reason for that is contour as a cosmetic product serves a very specific purpose. It is literally creating contours or shadows or making parts of your face look more recessed. It is not there to match your colors or blend in with your coloring the way that a color product is supposed to. Now, a lot of people will use warm bronzers as contours, and they will use contours as bronzers. I think that the reason some people get away with that is contours are inherently very cool. They are very shadowed products. It is essentially a bronzer that you have added gray to. Gray is how we create shadow. When you see somebody who is putting their contour at the places on their face that the sun would naturally hit, like a bronzer, if they're using a product that has a lot of gray in it and that still looks good on them, that's probably an indicator that they are a cool season. If I did something like that, it would probably look very muddy and just not quite right. In fact, I think it would drag my face down instead of making it appear bronzed and lifted. So I use just a little bit of contour under the cheekbones and just on the sides of the tip of my nose. I don't tend to drag it all the way up, but I'm just going to blend that out and create a little bit of shadow and cheekbone shaping. Okay, so next let's get into blush and bronzer for True Springs. So True Springs are very light and bright and warm. And so therefore cosmetics we're trying to avoid are things that are gonna be too dark, too soft, or too cool. Light and dark can be pretty easy, but going too soft or too cool is, I think, where the problem mostly lies when it comes to cosmetics. The reason for that is a lot of cosmetics to be made that very popular nude color. All I have to do is say that and you're picturing something in your head. I know you are. Those actually appear very soft when you put them next to something that is gonna look nice on a True Spring. I'll show you a couple of examples either here on the screen or at the end of the video or with some other color products that we can get into. The warmth versus cool, that's also very tricky because spring colors, when you're talking about cosmetics, you're really getting into peaches, corals, orangey sorts of shades. This one is by Dibs Beauty. It's a nice duet because these two together will always actually, for me, create a really nice peachy color. The pink does not overtake that corally color at all. This is another example from Jane Iredale. This one's a little bit on the softer side, but not so soft that it's leaking into autumn. It actually still looks really lovely and bright on the skin. I think there's a lot that goes on there. There's just something about makeup where we are always drawn intuitively or because of influence to things that land in the neutral or cool zone. So when you're introduced to your warm palette and you see that there's not a lot of pinks to choose from and that your nudes are corals and peaches, it can be very intimidating, but that's what we want to do here. So I have another Dibs Beauty product here. I'm going to go in with the bronzer first. Bronzer is another one. We need to talk about that. So for bronzers, you definitely just don't want anything that's too orange and heavy. As a True Spring, you want something that is, again, light and bright. And bronzers very quickly become too orange and too dark. Look at that nice, gorgeous, light bronzing effect that I get with this shade. There are so many bronzers on the market that you can maybe dab them on, but they will very quickly just turn very heavy and orange. This is a fabulous example of one that doesn't do that. So with your bronzers, that's what you want to be careful of there, primarily sticking with something that is nice and light. This is the Dibs Desert Island Duo Stick in shade 3. That was the bronzer side. So let's go ahead and look at this one's blush. This is a gorgeous example of a peach, a nice light peach that isn't too soft, and it's gonna look absolutely stunning. I'm gonna go right over top of where that bronzer is. You can barely see it. Do you see how light and refreshing that peachy color is? People will go shopping for their blushes in this color family, and corals and oranges, it is really difficult. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of times that those corally oranges, they will overtake. They're very dramatic, and especially if you are a low contrast spring. Contrast is another topic when it comes to doing your makeup for your color season that we can do in another video. It will throw everything off and it will immediately look too heavy, and you might be looking at it and saying, but it's warm and it's peachy, so why is it throwing things off? And it has to do with that depth of color. But so there now we have like contour, bronzer, peachy blush, and it just looks like an enhancement of my skin. It's nothing that is too crazy or too heavy. So I'm gonna let that sit for a few minutes while we do eyebrows, and then I will probably put on powder and go in with a little bit more of a peachy blush just to give you another example and something else to look at. Eyebrows are another one that I get a lot of questions about for people who either want to microblade or tint or go in every day like I do with a cosmetic product. I have used very warm eyebrow products in the past, and the problem with them is that they often will pull orange. And so you look like you have a little bit of like a carrot top eyebrow going on. And again, people are going to try to steer away from something that's too soft or too gray And yet the Anastasia Beverly Hills Dip Brow Pomade in Taupe has been my go-to for a very long time, even though in theory, taupe is neutral and it's gonna be too cool. As I put this on, you can see my hairline up here. It's a little bit damp, but that's not too far off from what my natural color looks like when it dries. Even being a neutral, very much like foundation, we're going for something that's gonna match your coloring, whether that's matching your natural eyebrow color and just filling in a little bit of sparseness, matching your natural hair. And even a warm blonde is not gonna be orange. So when you're picking out your eyebrow colors, you are again trying to find something that matches or is just a shade or two darker than your natural hair without worrying too much about whether it's considered warm or cool. So I thought that was recording. My mistake, it wasn't. The blush that I went in and sort of enhanced my cheeks with is this one by Faux Fay that I got off of TikTok Shop. This is in shade number 4, and you can see it's very light and bright and peachy. Now by comparison, if I go back to this Dibs Beauty Blush and you look at this side of it, you can really see how this one is a very blue pink and shimmery, and this one is a very orangey pink and shimmery. And yes, it's true, this one is even a little bit brighter than the orange side of the Dibs Beauty Baked Blush, but they're both absolutely gorgeous. Don't get so caught up in it that you think you can only wear very, very bright makeup. There are lots of makeups that will be sort of somewhere in the middle. As I said, this Jane Iredale one that I love to wear is actually perfect. It's very peachy, it's very light. You're looking for something that is going to fall into those categories of lightness, brightness, and warmth, even if maybe they aren't all at the forefront of what the color is, quite like this Faux Fay one. So if I show you another comparison, this one's not a shimmery blush, but if we look at the Faux Fay again and you're still looking at this and you're seeing pink, this one is by Pat McGrath. And look at how blue-based pink this one is versus this one. Now, when I put these two side by side, you can really see how much more orange the Faux Fay is. And guys, I have so many options for different cosmetic recommendations for all of the color palettes over in my Shop My under the Color Analysis tab. So I will have that linked down below and you guys can go and check that out. So as mentioned, I'm not gonna do too much with eyeshadow in this video, but I am gonna go in just really lightly. And this has been sort of my go-to palette for light, warm, bright spring looks. This is Feel and Bubbly from ColourPop. I'll show you guys this later in the video against some other palettes so you can really see how warm the majority of these colors are. But this has sort of been my go-to, and so I'm just gonna put a little bit of that on before we talk lipstick. And while I'm finishing this up, just one little thing, mascara. So there's a lot of talk online about how if you are a warm undertone, you should be wearing brown mascara instead of black. In some instances, that is true. It'll look a little bit better. It is a little bit warmer and creates a little bit less of a dramatic look. But I also think the color mascara you wear comes down to your contrast levels. I'm very low contrast, so a brown can look a little bit better on me. If you're someone like a Summer that comes from a very soft season, something more like a gray or a soft black or charcoal mascara might do the trick for you. But I also just think sometimes the goal with the mascara is exactly to create a dramatic look, enhance your natural lashes. So I would just say wear whatever you want. Lipsticks can be a lot of fun, but they are also probably one of the easiest places to trip up. I have so many clients who come to me with colors that look like this one, and they feel like it just doesn't look quite right on them and they can't figure out why. So this is a very neutral pink color. It's very neutral. You've got like a little bit of a shimmer in it, but it's just this very neutral mauve-y color. And these are the colors that influencers always say are trending, that it's always their go-to lip, etc. So people buy them and then they wonder why it looks funny on them. So here is an example of a color that is brighter. You can see how much more gray is in this one when you put it next to this one. But this one is very cool. It's much cooler, it's much pinker. Whereas this one is brighter and warmer. You can see how much there isn't gray in this one the way there is in this one. And this one, very much like our blushes, we're back to having that gorgeous peachy color as opposed to something that's very cool pink. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this on because as a very low contrast woman, I always tell my clients who are also low contrast that lipstick is inherently, for the most part, a very intense, highly saturated beauty product. And so low contrast, meaning you don't have a lot of intensity in your contrast, you don't have dark hair and light skin, you don't need something that's a really heavily saturated lip. Doing your makeup to your contrast levels. Like I said, maybe that's worth its own video. But so I tend to gravitate toward colored glosses, and Pat McGrath is my absolute favorite. Now, the other thing that we talked about is going too light or too dark. So I have a couple of lipsticks here that I think showcase this very well. This is Clinique's Melon Pop. I love this color as a lipstick. I also like it because as far as lipsticks go, it's not super matte and saturated. Now, if I put it next to MAC's C Sheer, this one is an autumn lip color. This one is a spring lip color. You can obviously see here how much darker and earthy the MAC lipstick is than the Clinique lipstick. And when a true spring puts on an autumn colored lip, it's gonna look bizarre and very heavy and almost clownish. And that is where you start running into those lipsticks that you run from because it makes you look like you've been playing in your mother's makeup. As mentioned in the video, I have some eyeshadow palettes to do some side-by-side comparisons, just like we did with blushes and lipsticks, so you can kind of see the difference between warm, neutral, and maybe neutral leaning cool. I don't have a ton of cool eyeshadows anymore since as a true spring, they don't look that good on me. But here we go. So this is the palette I showed you guys in the video. This is the ColourPop Feelin' Bubbly palette, and this is sort of my go-to. This is the one that is sort of my litmus test for other shadows because most of these are warm. Now, one of the things about eyeshadow palettes is that you are rarely going to find a palette that is completely warm or completely cool because you've got blending colors and highlighting colors. They are designed to sort of be a constellation of different colors, if you will. But for the most part, this one leans beautifully warm and it's my everyday palette. Now, another palette from ColourPop, this is their 1111 Angel Number palette, by comparison, is actually very neutral. It's more neutral and it's much darker. So these colors here, for example, these three across the top and this one, compared to similar colors in this palette, you can see how much more gray is in these colors than you would have over in these colors, like these ones here. The more gray you have, the more neutral and cool you're leaning. And obviously here we have some similar dark colors, but again, you can see it very well in this one and particularly in these ones. A lot more gray in these dark shadows than you have over here. You have a very warm yellow-based brown and another fairly warm brown here as well. Another example of some neutrals that are warm but more neutral than these ones is this Hourglass Curator palette that I picked up in the shade Idealist. These are a lot closer, especially if I put those ones side by side. But even looking at these two here in the bottom versus these two here in the Hourglass palette, you can see that these ones are ever so slightly more pink, which makes them a little bit cooler and therefore neutral as compared to the ColourPop. Another great comparison I want to show you is two of my favorite Natasha Denona palettes. So this first one I'm going to show you is the Golden palette. This one is lovely. Sorry, that one at the top broke out and crumbled on me. But I love this one for springs, despite the inclusion of some very dark, spicy colors that are almost autumnal and probably belong more in the autumn palette. But taken as a whole, these are very golden, very light to medium. Regardless, they're very warm shadows. She has another palette that I think is called Give Me a Bronze, and that one, all of the browns in it, instead of being a super yellow-based brown, there's a lot more red-based browns. And when you start seeing that in the tones, that is definitely going to be an indicator of autumn colors. Okay, so this one, as compared to another favorite of mine, which is the Glam palette, look at how cool and neutral and gray the Glam palette is compared to how warm this Golden palette is. Now, this palette, sorry, I can't do this with just one hand. This palette has a couple of colors in it that when you look at just this palette alone, you would think that these are some very warm browns. But again, when I hold them up next to the browns from the golden palette, you can see how much cooler they are. There's so much gray in this palette that there isn't in this palette, that by comparison, the Glam palette almost just looks cool. It looks like a cool gray palette, when in fact it's really not. It's pretty neutral. So as I said at the start of this video, I have a Shop My page that is devoted to color analysis recommendations by palette. You can go and check that out. And I would encourage you, when you go into stores like Ulta, Sephora, and you are comparing and contrasting colors, put them side by side, swatch them on your hands, and let them sort of show you when you are comparing them to one another, which ones are gonna keep you in that light, bright, and warm color family for your True Spring palette. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with another one.